On a cold November night, rain lashes against Main Street's cobblestones. Ethan Ward, heading home in his black Range Rover, spots a young woman trudging along with a single suitcase, her coat soaked through. The windshield wipers swept rhythmically, barely keeping up with the downpour. Street lamps glowed hazily through the mist, casting long streaks of gold on the wet pavement. The sound of water rushing into the drains echoed faintly through the quiet street. Across the way, Clara Benson was locking up her bakery, turning the key in the heavy wooden door before pulling her scarf tighter around her neck. Through the rain-streaked glass, she caught sight of the dark SUV slowing to a crawl. Her eyes followed the driver's gaze to the lone figure on the sidewalk. "Storm's bringing something big this time," she murmured almost to herself. In Willow Creek, Clara had learned to read the signs. Change often arrived unannounced, and more often than not, it rode in with the rain. The woman, Sophia Morales, kept her head down, one hand gripping the suitcase handle, the other clinging to the collar of her soaked coat. Her hair clung to her cheeks, and the hem of her dress was heavy with water. The shop awning she ducked under offered little protection. The wind sent cold sheets of rain sideways, splattering her shoes. She shivered, glancing at the darkened storefronts, as if weighing whether to knock on one of the locked doors. Ethan slowed to a stop beside the curb, the Range Rover's headlights catching the droplets in her hair. He rolled down the passenger side window, the warm air from the heater spilling into the night. "You look like you could use a ride," he said, his tone even, but laced with genuine concern. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the logo on the SUV's grille, then back to his face. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice trembled. "Really?" he asked, glancing at the wind whipping the rain in every direction. "Because standing out here much longer, you'll be soaked clear through." For a moment, the only sound between them was the rain drumming against metal and glass. Finally, she let out a breath that fogged in the cold air. "Long night," he prompted gently. "Longest one yet," she admitted. Her fingers tightened on the suitcase handle, then she stepped forward and opened the door. The warmth of the vehicle enveloped her immediately. She pulled the door shut and sat back against the leather seat, her wet coat releasing the faint scent of rain and something floral beneath it. Ethan put the car in gear, pulling away from the curb. They passed the familiar landmarks of Main Street, the dark outline of the library, the church steeple just visible beyond the low clouds, the flickering neon open sign of Benson's Bakery. The smell of fresh bread still lingered faintly in the damp air, carried from Clara's kitchen, even after the doors were locked. Sophia said little at first, her gaze fixed out the side window, watching the raindrops chase each other down the glass. Ethan didn't push. Years of running businesses in a small town had taught him that some silences were better respected. When they reached the long driveway of Hillcrest Manor, the Range Rover's headlights illuminated the white columns of the colonial-style estate. Warm light spilled from the windows, glistening off the wet brick steps. Sophia's eyes widened, but she said nothing. "I've got a guest house out back," Ethan explained, as they passed the main house and followed the gravel path toward a smaller building tucked behind a row of maple trees. "It's nothing fancy, but it's dry and warm. You can stay there as long as you need." Her voice caught. "You don't even know me." He glanced over, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. "Sometimes that's the best time to help someone." The guest house was cozy, a single-story cottage with a small porch framed by 2 wicker chairs. The porch light glowed, haloing the falling rain. Ethan parked and stepped out, circling to open her door before she could reach for the handle. The gravel crunched under his boots as he retrieved her suitcase from the back. She followed him up the steps, the sound of rain pattering on the tin porch roof. Inside, the air was warm, smelling faintly of cedar and laundry soap. A braided rug lay in front of the sofa, and a quilt was folded neatly across the armrest. "You can hang your coat there," Ethan said, pointing to the stand by the door. "Thermostat set to 72, but you can adjust it if you want. I'll bring you some tea in a bit." Sophia peeled off her coat, draping it over the stand. For the first time that evening, her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you," she said, almost too softly to hear. Ethan set her suitcase just inside the bedroom door, then turned back to her. "You're welcome. I'll leave you to get settled." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a spare key, the metal glinting under the lamplight. Outside, the rain kept falling steady and unrelenting, as if determined to wash the streets clean. The wind picked up as Ethan stepped back outside, his coat collar turned up against the cold. Sophia lingered in the doorway for a moment, her eyes following him through the rain-silvered glass. The porch light caught in the droplets sliding from his hair and shoulders before he disappeared into the dim outline of the main house. She let out a slow breath and shut the door. The warmth inside felt almost unreal after hours in the biting wind. She set her suitcase beside the sofa, fingers working at the stubborn zipper. Inside were only a few changes of clothes, some toiletries, and a worn photo in a cracked frame, her and her mother, in front of a small stucco house back in San Antonio. She set the picture on the nightstand in the bedroom before returning to the living area. Through the guest house windows, she could see the faint glow of a town in the distance, the blurred outline of Main Street. Willow Creek wasn't big, just a cluster of shops, a few churches, and the diner everyone swore had the best pecan pie in Virginia. She hadn't thought she'd be seeing it again under these circumstances. Her mind flashed back to just hours ago, standing in Lucas Grant's doorway, her voice trembling as she told him she was pregnant. She remembered his expression, shifting surprise, then something colder. "This isn't my problem," he'd said, and the door had closed behind her, with a finality that left her stomach hollow. A soft knock on the guest house door broke the thought. When she opened it, Ethan stood there with a steaming mug in one hand and a small plate balanced in the other. "Chamomile tea," he said, stepping inside, "and one of Clara's cranberry scones. She insists I keep a stash for emergencies." The aroma hit her instantly, warm, tart, and sweet all at once. She wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into her fingers. "You didn't have to, I know," he replied simply. "But nobody should go to bed cold or hungry." They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The lamplight softened the edges of the room, casting a gentle glow over the pine cabinets and the bowl of green apples in the center. For a while, the only sounds were the rain against the roof and the clink of her spoon against the mug. "You've been in Willow Creek long?" he asked eventually. "On and off," she said. "I came back a few months ago. Thought I'd found something solid this time." Ethan didn't press. Instead, he told her about Hillcrest Manor, how it had been in his family for 3 generations, how he'd restored the guest house himself after it fell into disrepair. Figured it might be useful for visitors, or times like this. Her gaze flicked to him. "You do this often? Take in strangers during storms?" He chuckled. "Not exactly. But I've learned you don't ignore someone who's clearly in trouble." The sincerity in his tone made her chest tighten unexpectedly. She'd met plenty of men with money before, but few who offered help without expecting something in return. Outside, the rain deepened, the steady patter turning into a roar as another band of the storm rolled through. The guest house creaked softly under the wind's push. Sophia finished her tea and set the mug down carefully. "I can find a place tomorrow. I don't want to impose." "You're not," Ethan said firmly. "Stay as long as you need. No questions asked." She studied him for a moment, trying to read his face. All she found was calm certainty. By the time Ethan rose to leave, the clock on the mantel read nearly 11. He paused at the door, holding out the spare key he'd brought earlier. The brass gleamed under the light. She took it, her fingers brushing his briefly. "Thank you," she said again. He gave a small nod. "Lock up." "Sleep well, Sophia." Then he stepped back into the night, his figure swallowed quickly by the curtain of rain. Left alone, she moved through the guest house, turning off the lights, pausing to check the locks twice before retreating to the bedroom. She pulled the quilt from the sofa arm and wrapped it around her shoulders, sitting on the edge of the bed to listen to the rain. It drummed a steady rhythm on the roof, a sound that might have been soothing if her mind weren't still buzzing. From across the property, faint lights glimmered through the trees, the warm glow of Hillcrest Manor's windows. For a moment, she imagined what it must be like inside, with its tall ceilings, crackling fireplace, and the quiet order of someone's carefully tended life. Then she looked around the guest house, the soft lamplight, the scent of chamomile lingering in the air, and realized she'd been given something she hadn't felt in a long time: safety. Back on Main Street, Clara Benson was still tidying the bakery kitchen, wiping down counters, and setting fresh loaves on cooling racks. Through the rain-streaked window, she could just make out the dark outline of the Range Rover, returning from the guest house. She shook her head slowly, a half-smile playing at her lips. Willow Creek had always been a place where people noticed things, and tonight Clara was certain people would have plenty to notice. Sophia drew the quilt tighter around her shoulders, the sound of the rain lulling her toward sleep. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now she had a roof over her head and a locked door between her and the storm. Sleep didn't come easily. Sophia lay in bed, eyes half closed, listening to the occasional groan of the wind outside. Every now and then, a car splashed through puddles on the distant road, the sound fading quickly back into the steady percussion of rain on the roof. When she finally drifted off, it was to the muted scent of chamomile and the faint warmth still lingering in her palms from the mug Ethan had handed her. Some time later, she couldn't tell how long she woke again. It wasn't noise that stirred her, but the sensation of unfamiliar quiet. The rain had eased to a fine mist, the kind that whispered against the glass instead of pounding it. In that softer silence, she could hear her own breathing and the hum of the heater Ethan had turned on earlier. She sat up, adjusting the quilt around her shoulders, and crossed to the small porch. The wicker chairs gleamed wet under the porch light. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of damp leaves. Across the yard, Hillcrest Manor stood silent and stately, its windows glowing like embers. For the first time since the afternoon, the knot in her chest loosened a little. Maybe she had been wrong to expect the worst from people. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something different. Ethan, meanwhile, had returned to the manor and settled into his study, the one room that still held the scent of old cedar from his grandfather's time. He dropped his coat over the arm of the leather chair and poured himself a glass of water. He had no idea who Sophia was beyond a name and the sight of her standing in the rain, but he'd learned enough from life to recognize when someone was on the edge. And he'd promised himself years ago, after his own rough season, that if he could keep someone else from standing out in the cold, he would. He glanced toward the rain-speckled window. The guest house porch light was still on, casting a soft amber pool against the dark. Back in town, the last few lights along Main Street were winking out as shopkeepers headed home. A lone delivery truck rumbled past the diner and disappeared toward the interstate. At the far end of the street, Clara Benson locked the bakery's front door, twisting the deadbolt with a practiced hand. She moved slowly, the way you do when you're not quite ready to leave the warmth behind. She'd seen a lot in her 65 years here, love blooming and breaking fortunes, rising and falling, and she'd learned to pay attention when something out of the ordinary passed her window. That night she had seen a man most folks only caught glimpses of at town fundraisers, stopping in the middle of a storm for a stranger. She'd watched them talk, the way the young woman clutched her suitcase, like it was the last thing tethering her to anything. She'd watched Ethan open his car door, speaking low and steady, until the woman finally climbed inside. Clara stepped into the back room, the warm smell of fresh bread still hanging in the air. Through the narrow side window, she could just make out the silhouette of Hillcrest Manor in the distance, a faint glow marking the guest house. Her lips curved into a knowing half-smile. She reached up to switch off the last light, her reflection mingling with the rain-streaked glass. And so it begins. By morning, the town's grapevine was already humming. It moved faster than the morning fog, lifting off Willow Creek's rolling hills, winding through the old post office, the barber shop, and the checkout line at Mason's grocery. Ethan Ward's taken in a pregnant maid, someone whispered over the clink of a coffee cup in the diner. The words spread like butter on a hot biscuit, easy, inevitable, and impossible to scrape away once they'd sunk in. Clara Benson stood behind the counter of her bakery, hands deep in a bowl of cinnamon sugar, listening to the muffled voices drifting in from the sidewalk. The remarks were just loud enough to catch speculation about where the woman had come from, whose baby it might be, and what Ethan Ward was thinking. She'd heard this tune before. It reminded her of the summer of '84, when young Henry Layton, barely 20 and heir to his father's tobacco farm, had shocked the county by marrying Rosa Alvarez, the farmhand's daughter. Back then, It had been the talk of every pew in every church. People forgave eventually, but they never really forgot. In Willow Creek, kindness was often conditional, and memory was long. At Hillcrest Manor, morning light streamed through the tall kitchen windows, falling across the wide farmhouse table. The scent of fresh ground coffee filled the air, mingling with the warmth of toast and scrambled eggs on the stove. Sophia sat at the edge of her chair, hands wrapped around a mug, her eyes wandering over the polished copper pots and neatly stacked cookbooks. She looked almost out of place against the backdrop of curated elegance. Ethan moved easily around the kitchen, sliding eggs onto a plate before glancing over at her. "Thought we might go into town this morning," he said, casual, but not careless. Her brows knit. "Into town? For breakfast at the diner," he clarified. "Best bacon within 50 miles. Sophia hesitated, her thumb tracing the rim of her mug. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. They'll talk." He gave a small, humorless smile. "They already are. Better to let them see you with me than let their imaginations run wild." She wanted to believe him, but the thought of walking into a room where every head might turn made her stomach knot. Still, something in his voice, steady, unbothered, eased her resistance. "All right," she said quietly. The bell above the Willow Creek diner door jingled when they walked in. A warm rush of air hit Sophia, thick with the smell of sizzling bacon, brewing coffee, and syrup. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, and a row of regulars occupied the counter, their elbows resting on formica as they nursed steaming mugs. Conversations dimmed just enough for her to notice. Eyes flicked up, then back down. One waitress, her name tag reading Bev, hesitated before offering a tight smile and leading them to a booth near the back. "Coffee?" Bev asked Ethan without looking at Sophia. And for her, Ethan said evenly, meeting the waitress's gaze until she scribbled both orders and walked away. Sophia stared at the menu, though the words blurred. She could feel the ripple of attention, people leaning closer to one another, whispers sliding under the low murmur of the radio in the corner. The door swung open again, and Clara Benson stepped inside, brushing rain from her coat. She spotted them instantly and made her way over with the kind of smile that drew warmth to a room. "Morning, Ethan. And you must be Sophia?" Clara said, extending her hand across the table. Her tone left no room for hesitation. Sophia's eyes widened slightly before she shook the offered hand. "Nice to meet you." Clara turned to the nearest booth, where an older man in a John Deere cap was sipping his coffee. "Frank, this is Sophia Morales," she announced. "She's new in town. Makes the most incredible empanadas. If we're lucky, she'll bring some by the bakery." Frank nodded, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a polite half-smile. One by one, other patrons looked over, offering small nods, a mumbled "mornin'," or at least the courtesy of acknowledgement. Sophia felt her shoulders relax a fraction. Clara had just forced the room to see her, not as gossip's shadow, but as a person. In the next booth, a truck driver in a faded plaid shirt leaned toward his companion. "Saw Gordon Hale in Riverton yesterday," he said, voice low, but not low enough. "Asking questions about some guy named Lucas Grant." Ethan's fork paused midair. He didn't turn, but he caught the rest as the driver continued. "Word is Hale's been sniffing around here, too." Miles away in a sleek townhouse, Lucas Grant's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, a frown tugging at his mouth. The message was from an unlisted number. "She's with Ward now." Bev returned with their coffee, setting Ethan's cup down gently before sliding Sophia's across the table with a brief nod. The porcelain was warm against Sophia's palms, the rising steam curling under her chin. She took a careful sip, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Bacon and eggs all around?" Bev asked, pen poised. "Pancakes for me," Ethan said, glancing at Sophia. She hesitated. "Just toast, please." Bev's eyebrow twitched almost imperceptibly before she wrote it down. "Coming right up." When the waitress was gone, Ethan leaned back in the booth, studying Sophia over the rim of his mug. "You like pancakes?" She nodded. "Then why toast?" She shrugged, eyes drifting to the window, streaked with condensation. "Didn't want to give them more to talk about. I guess. Ordering a big breakfast with you after last night?" Her voice trailed off. His lips curved in a small, dry smile. "Sophia, you can order the whole menu, and it wouldn't change what they'll say." People around here will make a meal out of crumbs. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Something about the certainty in his voice grounded her like a steady hand in rough water. Across the diner, Clara slid into the booth beside Frank, chatting about the holiday pie orders she'd been getting. Her eyes, however, kept darting toward Ethan and Sophia. She wasn't worried for them, not exactly, but she recognized the way small-town currents could shift against someone new. It could be subtle, a pause before a greeting, a cup refilled slower than usual, a seat left open just a little too long. She'd seen it happen before, back when she was younger and had less gray in her hair. And she'd seen how the smallest kindness, a handshake, an introduction, could turn the tide, or at least slow it. When Bev returned with their plates, Clara caught her eye. "Bev, you still got that blueberry jam? Bring some for their toast." Bev hesitated a fraction before nodding. "Sure thing." Clara winked at Sophia. "Best in the county. Don't let her be stingy with it." A genuine smile tugged at Sophia's lips for the first time that morning. The low murmur of the diner swelled briefly when two farmers came in, stamping their boots against the mat. One of them nodded toward Ethan's booth and muttered something under his breath. Clara's friend Frank frowned. "Seems like Gordon Hale's been stirring the pot again," he said. "If he's talking to Lucas, that's trouble." Ethan caught the words but didn't let them show on his face. He finished his coffee, placed a few bills under the saucer, and looked across the table, ready. Sophia glanced toward the door, then back at him. "Yeah." When they slid out of the booth, conversation dimmed just enough for her to notice. Heads turned, eyes flicked upward. She kept her chin level, one hand on the strap of her bag, the other resting against the small curve of her belly. At the counter, Clara intercepted them. "Don't be strangers, you hear," she said warmly, giving Sophia's arm a light squeeze. "Thank you," Sophia replied, and the words held more weight than Clara could know. Outside, the crisp November air wrapped around them. The rain had stopped, but puddles glistened in the ruts along Main Street. A man in a tan overcoat stepped out of the hardware store, offering Ethan a polite nod before letting his gaze linger on Sophia for a beat too long. She looked away, her steps quickening toward the Range Rover. Once they were inside, Ethan started the engine but didn't pull away. "You all right?" She nodded, though her hands were tight in her lap. "I don't want to cause trouble for you." His voice was steady, unshaken. "You're not the trouble small minds are." The truth in it landed deep, loosening something inside her. As they drove back toward Hillcrest Manor, Sophia let her eyes wander over the town. The weathered storefronts, the brick church with its white steeple, the diner's neon sign now flickering faintly in the daylight. It all felt like a place frozen between decades. But under the charm, she sensed currents she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was just her own unease coloring things. Or maybe it was what Clara had hinted at without saying outright. Willow Creek had a long memory. At the edge of town, Ethan slowed for a pickup to turn onto the road. A familiar figure sat behind the wheel, a broad-shouldered man in a dark ball cap heading the opposite way. He didn't look at them, but Ethan recognized him all the same. Gordon Hale. Ethan didn't comment on Gordon as the truck disappeared in the side mirror, but Sophia noticed the slight tightening of his grip on the steering wheel. The silence between them stretched until the trees of Hillcrest's driveway came into view. Gravel crunched under the tires as they climbed the winding path toward the manor. Inside the guest house, the warmth was a welcome contrast to the cool November air. Ethan carried a paper bag from the diner to the small kitchen counter. "Brought you an extra sandwich," he said, unwrapping his own coffee cake. "In case you get hungry later." Sophia leaned against the counter, fingers brushing the warm wax paper. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said, matter of fact, "but you've had enough of people telling you what you do or don't deserve. Consider this. Balance." Her lips curved faintly. "Balance. I like that." While Ethan stepped out to take a phone call, Sophia walked to the window. From here, she could see the edge of the town's rooftops in the distance, sun glinting off the wet streets. A faint hum of life seemed to carry on the air, as if the town was already turning her into a story to be passed over counters and porches. Back in town, Clara was washing baking trays in the back of her shop when the bell above the bakery door jingled. She dried her hands on her apron and stepped out front to find Frank again, his brow furrowed. "You hear about Gordon?" he asked in a low voice. Clara shook her head. He was over in Harper's Mill last night asking around about Lucas Grant. And this morning Rick Sawyer said he overheard him asking questions about a woman pregnant Latina. Sounds a lot like your new friend with Ward. Clara felt a flicker of unease. She'd lived in Willow Creek long enough to know when curiosity crossed the line into something sharper. What's Gordon's business with Lucas? Frank shrugged. Old deals from what I gather. Not the kind of thing folks talk about loud. She pressed her lips together, already making a mental note to keep her eyes open. The next day, Sophia woke early to the smell of coffee. She found Ethan in the main house's kitchen, sleeves rolled up, pouring from a French press into 2 mugs. "You're up early," he said. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too many thoughts." He handed her a mug, the rich aroma mingling with the faint scent of wood smoke from the hearth. "We've all had mornings like that." They ate a quiet breakfast, but when Ethan suggested they drive into town again to pick up a few supplies, Sophia hesitated. "After yesterday." "Yesterday is already yesterday," he said gently. "You can't hide from people forever." The drive into town felt easier this time, though she still caught glimpses of sidelong looks. They stopped at the general store for tea and extra blankets. Outside, a couple of teenagers whispered to each other, glancing at her before darting off. It stung, but less than she'd feared. By mid-afternoon, they returned to Main Street. Ethan parked near Clara's bakery, suggesting they grab something fresh before heading back. The smell of cinnamon and butter drifted out as they stepped inside. Clara lit up at the sight of them. "Well, don't you look more settled today," she said to Sophia, sliding a tray of cranberry scones onto the counter. "Try one while it's still warm." Sophia accepted the offer, the flaky crust melting on her tongue. "These are amazing." "Thank you, dear." Clara poured coffee into paper cups and leaned on the counter. "You should know, not everyone in this town listens to the wrong voices. Some of us make up our own minds." Sophia's eyes softened. "That means more than you think." A customer entered and Clara turned to ring up their order. Ethan and Sophia lingered by the front window, watching the late daylight fade over the rooftops. Across the street, a truck driver in a Carhartt jacket leaned against his rig, talking to another man. As they passed the bakery window, Sophia caught the tail end of a sentence. "Yeah, saw Gordon in the next town over, asking about that Lucas fellow." The name made her stomach tighten. In another corner of the county, Lucas Grant sat in his office, the glow from his phone lighting his face. A message had arrived from an unknown number. "She's with Ward now." Lucas stared at it for a long moment, jaw working before typing back, "Keep me posted." Back in the bakery, Clara finished with her customer and walked over. "I've been thinking, Sophia, you ever consider helping out here a few mornings a week? Just until you're on your feet." Sophia hesitated. "I wouldn't want to—" "Nonsense," Clara interrupted with a smile. "You've got a friendly face, and the regulars could stand to meet you without all the whispering." Ethan glanced at Sophia, an unspoken encouragement in his eyes. She found herself nodding. "All right. I'd like that." Clara clapped her hands lightly. "Good. We'll start tomorrow." They lingered a few more minutes before saying their goodbyes. Ethan held the bakery door for Sophia, the little brass bell chiming, as they stepped into the cool evening. From her place by the counter, Clara watched them walk down Main Street together, their figures framed by the glow of the street lamps. In the set of Sophia's shoulders, she saw both resolve and the weight of something not yet understood. That girl's in the middle of something bigger than she knows. The rain is cleared, but the air is sharp and cold when a sleek black Mercedes glides up Hillcrest Manor's driveway. Frost laced the tops of the boxwood hedges, sparkling faintly in the pale November sun. The rhythmic crunch of gravel under low-profile tires broke the mid-morning stillness. From the guest house, Sophia caught the movement through the lace-curtained window. Her hands paused over the mug of tea she'd been cradling. The sight of that particular car pulled something tight in her chest, an unwelcome familiarity she had tried to leave behind. Up at the manor, Ethan stepped onto the front steps, coat collar turned against the wind. He'd been arranging the last of the Thanksgiving wreaths along the columns, their burlap bows stirring faintly in the breeze. The polished Mercedes rolled to a stop directly before him. The driver's door opened with a smooth, deliberate motion, and Lucas Grant emerged. Tall, immaculately dressed in a charcoal overcoat and tailored navy suit, He looked more like he was stepping onto the set of a magazine shoot than into a small-town driveway. His eyes locked on Ethan's with a cool, appraising sweep. "Ward," Lucas said, as though the name itself were a challenge. "Grant," Ethan replied evenly. "If you're here for business, you've got the wrong address." Lucas's lips curved, though there was no warmth in it. "I'm here for Sophia." His gaze flicked toward the guest house before returning to Ethan. "I hear you've made yourself useful." Ethan stepped down one stair, closing the space between them. "She's a guest under my roof. That means she's under my protection." His voice was calm but carried an edge that made the words land like steel. "You think this is about protection?" Lucas's tone sharpened. "You don't even know the half of it. Taking in a woman you barely know. Especially one carrying another man's child isn't generosity, it's arrogance. You're playing hero. And you're playing what Ethan countered. The man who threw her out into the rain." A flicker passed across Lucas's expression, there and gone again. "You don't know what happened that night." "I know enough," Ethan said, his jaw set. "If you have something worth saying, you can say it respectfully, or you can leave my driveway." Lucas's shoulders stiffened. "I want to speak to her, alone." "She doesn't owe you that. She owes me more than you realize." From the lane beyond the gates, Clara Benson approached slowly, her wicker basket tucked in the crook of her arm, the scent of cinnamon sugar trailing ahead of her. She had been bringing her annual batch of Thanksgiving cookies for Ethan's staff, but she stopped short when she saw Lucas standing there. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly as she recognized him, then softened when they found Sophia's face in the guest house window. Ethan didn't move. "If she agrees, that's her choice, but you'll do it inside the guest house with me nearby." Lucas gave a curt nod. "Fine." Inside the guest house was modest but tidy. Sophia had arranged her few belongings with a kind of careful respect for the space, her worn leather satchel on the armchair, a folded quilt from the manor, draped neatly over the sofa. Lucas stepped inside, first the cold clinging to his overcoat, followed by Sophia, who stayed near the door. "You look well." Lucas began, his voice softer now, though guarded. "I look like someone you left without a home," Sophia replied, her tone steady. Lucas's gaze darted briefly to her midsection, where the gentle swell of her pregnancy was more visible now. "There's something about this baby you don't know." Sophia's breath caught, but before she could respond, a sharp knock rattled the door. Ethan's voice came through, low but urgent. "We've got company." Lucas's head tilted in the irritation. "What now?" Ethan opened the door just enough to admit Clara, her cheeks pink from the cold cinnamon still lingering from the basket she clutched. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to hear this." Ethan's eyes went to her face immediately. "What is it?" Clara set the basket on the small table, her expression grave. "I just overheard at the gas station Gordon Hale's in town, asking questions about Sophia's past." The name seemed to slice the air. Sophia's fingers curled around the edge of the chair. "Why would he be—" Lucas cut her off, his jaw tightening, the temperature in the room seeming to drop another degree. "If Gordon's here, you're in more danger than you think." Sophia's pulse thudded in her ears. She had not heard the name Gordon Hale in years, but its weight returned all at once, like a shadow slipping back across her path. She looked from Lucas to Ethan, her gaze searching for a clue to what this meant. "Who is he?" Ethan asked, his voice level, but with that quiet intensity Sophia had learned meant he was already calculating the next move. Lucas didn't answer right away. He glanced toward Clara, as though measuring how much to say, with another person in the room. Clara, sensing the tension, folded her arms, but didn't budge. "If it's trouble for her, I'm staying," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ethan stepped inside, fully closing the door against the wind. "We're all ears." Lucas exhaled through his nose. "Gordon Hale used to be involved with Lucas's property deals in Richmond?" Clara murmured, recalling something she'd heard years ago, but Lucas held up a hand. "He's more than that," Lucas said, his jaw flexing. "He runs in circles where people's pasts become currency." "And Sophia?" He stopped, catching her eyes. "He's got a piece of yours, something he can use." Sophia's breath was tight. "From when I was working at the Riverside Club," Lucas nodded grimly. "Before you left for Willow Creek, He's been sniffing around since the day you walked out. And if he's here, it's not for a friendly visit. Ethan's expression sharpened. What kind of peace are we talking about? Lucas hesitated, weighing the truth. A file documents photos, things that can be twisted, things that could ruin her name in a place like this. Sophia felt her stomach knot. The bakery, the diner, the nods from strangers on Main Street. Suddenly she saw them turning into whispers and side glances. Ethan looked directly at her. We're not going to let that happen. Lucas's brow lifted slightly. Yes, Ethan said. Whatever else you and I disagree on, we can agree. She doesn't deserve to have her life dragged through the mud. Clara stepped forward, setting the basket of cookies onto the coffee table, as if to anchor the room in something familiar. Then you'd better decide fast how you're going to handle him, she said. Because in a town this size, word travels faster than frost. A silence followed, broken only by the faint tick of the guest house's wall clock. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself. Why now? Why, after all this time? Lucas leaned one hand on the back of the chair. Because he knows you're vulnerable, pregnant, living under another man's roof. He'll use any angle to make it look like you're hiding something. That's because you never told me the full story. Sophia shot back, her voice tight with frustration. If you'd been honest from the start, maybe I wouldn't be blindsided like this. Lucas didn't flinch. You think I wanted this for you? For any of us. Ethan interjected before the argument could spiral. Enough. Right now we need facts, not blame. Clara, can you find out who else he's talked to? I'll see what I can do, Clara said, already reaching for her phone. Lucas's eyes stayed on Sophia. I came here to talk about the baby, but if Hale is here, that conversation's going to have to wait. Protecting you takes priority. The way he said protecting made something shift in Sophia's chest, an echo of the man she had once thought she could trust. But the memory of that rainy night when he turned her away was just as sharp. What does he want from me? She asked quietly. Lucas's gaze darkened. Leverage, money, maybe to settle a score. But he won't come to you directly at first. He'll stir the pot, get the gossip to a boil, make you look guilty before you even know the charges. Ethan glanced toward the window, scanning the driveway, as though expecting to see another car pull in. Then we stay ahead of him. Sophia's voice wavered. And if we can't, then Ethan said we fight him on our terms. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of cinnamon from Clara's basket, to mingle with the cold, clean air. Clara slipped her phone back into her pocket. I'll start at the gas station. Folks there like to talk if you buy a cup of coffee and listen more than you speak. Lucas stepped aside to let her pass. Don't tell him you're looking for him. Just keep your ears open. Clara gave him a look. This isn't my first time running the grapevine. When the door closed behind her, Sophia sank onto the couch. I thought leaving Richmond meant leaving all of this behind. Ethan crouched in front of her, his eyes steady on hers. Sometimes the past follows you, but so do people willing to stand in front of you. Her throat tightened. Both of you. Lucas's voice was quieter now. Both of us. The sound of gravel crunching outside drew Ethan's eyes toward the front window. He rose slowly, his shoulders squaring, as if expecting the worst. That's not Clara coming back, he murmured. Sophia followed his gaze, catching sight of a figure moving along the lane toward the main house. The late afternoon sun had dipped low, casting long, sharp shadows across the frosted hedges. The front door swung open a moment later, and Clara stepped in, cheeks flushed from the cold. But she wasn't alone. Her breath came quick, and there was urgency in her voice. I just heard something at the station, she said, closing the door behind her. Gordon Hale is here. Saw him myself leaning against the pump island, like he owned the place. Sophia's heart skipped. Lucas stiffened, his eyes narrowing. Who told you his name? Didn't need to be told, Clara replied. Man like that doesn't forget a face? And he was asking questions about a woman staying out at Hillcrest Manor. Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides. Did he see you? No, Clara said. I stayed behind a delivery truck and listened. He paid cash for gas, bought a coffee, and made sure the clerk knew he was just passing through. But he lingered. People who are passing through don't linger. Lucas moved to the small window of the guest house, peering out toward the drive. He's testing the water, seeing who bites before he moves in. Sophia's mind raced, replaying the last time she'd seen Gordon. His smile had been too smooth, his eyes too calculating, like he already knew what she would say before she said it. She gripped the armrest of the couch to steady herself. "What do we do?" she asked, the words barely more than a whisper. Ethan looked at Lucas. "You have history with him." "What's his play?" Lucas's jaw tightened. "He'll come to you, Ethan. Not her. At least not at first. Men like him prefer to challenge the man they think is in control. He'll offer you something, or threaten you with something. And either way, he'll expect you to trade. Trade what Sophia asked. Your reputation, your comfort, maybe even your business connections, Lucas said. He doesn't care about collateral damage as long as he gets what he wants. Clara set the basket of cookies down with more force than necessary. Then he's in for a surprise. Willow Creek doesn't scare easy. That's where you're wrong, Lucas said quietly. Willow Creek doesn't scare easy, but it gossips fast. And gossip is the soil he plants his poison in. Ethan's hand curled into a fist at his side. I'll talk to him if he shows up here, but not without witnesses. Lucas turned from the window, facing Ethan squarely. If you do keep her out of it, he feeds on fear, and he'll smell it on her. Sophia felt a spark of anger. I'm not some fragile thing to hide behind curtains. No, Lucas said, his voice softening. You're stronger than you think. But that's exactly what makes you a target. The room went still for a long beat, the ticking clock marking the only movement of time. Clara finally broke it. Thanksgiving's in 2 days. The town's going to be buzzing with visitors and relatives. He could slip in and out without anyone noticing unless we're watching for him. Ethan nodded. Then we watch. Lucas stepped closer to Sophia, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I came here today to talk about the baby. But if Hale's here... He paused, scanning her face, then glanced toward Ethan, as if weighing the next words. You're in more danger than you think. Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and golden over Willow Creek, the low sun washing the hills in amber light. From the community hall at the edge of Main Street, the mingled scents of cinnamon roasting turkey and buttery pie crust drifted out into the brisk air. A few yellow leaves skittered across the sidewalk, catching in the boots of early arriving volunteers. Ethan's black Range Rover pulled up alongside the curb, its trunk packed with 2 large trays of roasted vegetables, carrots glazed with maple syrup, green beans tossed with almonds. Sophia stepped out carefully, wrapping her coat tighter against the cold. The air bit at her cheeks, but the warmth in Ethan's voice steadied her. You ready for this? He asked, lifting one of the trays with ease. Sophia hesitated, scanning the busy scene inside the hall through its tall windows. People were already moving in a friendly rhythm, laughter from the kitchen, the scrape of chairs on the polished wood floor, someone calling across the room about the number of place settings. I'm ready, she said finally, though her fingers tightened around the tray she carried. The moment they stepped inside, Clara Benson intercepted them with the efficiency of someone who had been running this event for decades. Her cranberry red apron was dusted with flour, and a smudge of whipped cream streaked one cheek. There you are, she said, reaching for the tray in Sophia's hands. Vegetables perfect. Kitchen's this way, dear. Sophia shot a quick glance at Ethan, but he only smiled and nodded toward the swinging door. Go on, I'll set up the drink station. Clara led her into the kitchen, where the air was thick with the smells of sage stuffing sweet potatoes and baked rolls fresh from the oven. 4 older women aprons, tied tight hair, neatly pinned, were bent over a long counter, cutting pumpkin pies into even wedges. Ladies, this is Sophia Morales, Clara announced. She's with Ethan. She made the roasted carrots. The women looked up with their eyes, warm but curious. One with silver hair and a tidy bun offered a smile. Well, aren't those beautiful? You'll have to share the recipe. Sophia felt her shoulders loosen a little. It's just maple and sea salt, she said, and one of the women chuckled. That's the secret, keep it simple. Another replied, handing her a towel. You can help us with the pecan pies next. For the next half hour, Sophia lost herself in the bustle. There was a comfort in the steady work, whipping cream, slicing pies, passing along dishes to be plated. The pie ladies, as Clara called them, began trading light-hearted stories about past Thanksgivings gone awry, a turkey left in the oven overnight, a cranberry sauce that set like concrete. By the time Ethan returned to the kitchen to check on her, Sophia had flour on her sleeve and a genuine smile tugging at her lips. He took a moment to simply watch her, the easy way she laughed at something Clara said, the way she stood a little taller now. In the main hall, the long tables had been laid with fall-themed centerpieces, small pumpkins, clusters of acorns, and jars filled with golden fairy lights. Families began to drift in hanging coats on hooks by the door. The hum of conversation rose as people found their seats, the clink of silverware mingling with the soft strains of instrumental folk music playing over the hall's speakers. Ethan guided Sophia to a seat near the center of the room. She caught more than a few glances in her direction, but the smiles now were less curious and more welcoming. Even when she heard the faint whisper of her name from 2 tables over, it no longer felt like a judgment, just a ripple of curiosity. A few minutes before the meal began, Lucas Grant arrived, dressed in a dark sport coat and carrying an envelope that he tucked inside his jacket pocket. He made a point of greeting the mayor, shaking hands with the pastor, and slipping a check into the donation box. People murmured approvingly, and Sophia noticed the practiced ease in his movements, how he seemed to know exactly where to stand for the most eyes to see him. Clara rang a small brass bell, calling the room to order. The pastor stepped forward to lead a short prayer, giving thanks for community, for the bounty before them, and for the blessings we've shared this year. As heads bowed, Sophia felt the weight of the moment, the warmth of Ethan's presence beside her, and the hum of belonging, something she hadn't expected to find here. When the meal began, conversation swelled, and the clatter of plates filled the room. Sophia poured cider for the children at her table, their cheeks flushed from playing tag outside. Across the hall, Lucas caught her eye and tipped his head slightly in greeting, a faint, unreadable smile on his lips. After the first round of turkey and mashed potatoes, the room settled into a comfortable rhythm. Conversations overlapped laughter at one end, quiet reminiscing at another. The dessert table was under constant siege, with Clara directing traffic like a general at the front lines. Sophia found herself next to one of the pie ladies, a spry woman named Marjorie, who spoke with the lilting drawl of someone born and raised in the Blue Ridge foothills. "You're with Ethan, aren't you?" Marjorie asked, scooping whipped cream onto a plate with the precision of a surgeon. Sophia's first instinct was to correct her. "I'm not with him," but she simply nodded, unsure how to label whatever this was. "He's been kind," she said, aware of the understatement. Marjorie's eyes softened. "Kindness counts for a lot around here, more than money. Though Ethan's got both, bless him." She gave Sophia's arm a gentle pat, then moved off to refill the whipped cream bowl. Across the room, Lucas was weaving his way from table to table, engaging in brief but deliberate exchanges. He had that practiced ability to make each person feel singled out, important. Sophia recognized it from the early days of knowing him, when she'd believed every compliment was genuine. Ethan, meanwhile, had been pulled into a conversation with the mayor about the town's plans to restore the old train depot. Sophia took the opportunity to step outside for some air. The afternoon sun had warmed the brick walkway just enough to melt the frost, and a light breeze carried the scent of wood smoke from a nearby chimney. She was about to turn back inside when Lucas appeared at her side, his expression unreadable. "Enjoying yourself?" he asked, his tone even. Sophia crossed her arms against the chill. "It's been nice." Lucas glanced toward the hall's open doors, then back at her. "You should be careful." Her brow furrowed. Careful of what? His voice dropped, pitched only for her. "Of who you trust here. Not everyone's as they seem." She let out a small, incredulous laugh. "Coming from you, that's it." "I'm serious, Soph." His hand hovered at her elbow, not quite touching. "There are people who will use what you're carrying for their own reasons." Before she could respond, a shadow stretched across the brick path. A man approached from the parking lot with an unhurried, deliberate stride. His suit was impeccably tailored, his shoes so polished they caught the low sunlight. "Speak of the devil," Lucas muttered under his breath. Sophia's gaze flicked between them. The newcomer had a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sophia Morales." His voice was smooth, measured, as if he'd been rehearsing the name. "Yes," she answered, though the word felt reluctant on her tongue. He extended a hand, the gold of his cufflink catching the light. Gordon Hale. I've heard a lot about you. Lucas shifted subtly, placing himself half a step closer to her, but Gordon didn't seem to notice or didn't care. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a crisp cream-colored envelope. This, Gordon said, holding it between two fingers, is something you'll want to see before you make any big decisions about your future. Sophia stared at the envelope, a flicker of unease running through her. What is it? Nothing I can explain in a hallway, Gordon replied. Better you read it for yourself. From inside, Clara's voice carried over the chatter, calling Sophia's name, reminding her they were about to serve coffee. The warmth of the hall beckoned, but the weight of Gordon's gaze rooted her in place. Lucas looked as if he wanted to snatch the envelope and tear it in half, but he kept his tone steady. You've said your piece. She doesn't need whatever game you're playing. Gordon's smile didn't falter, but there was an edge to it now. Games are for people who have time to waste, Lucas. I deal in facts. He extended the envelope once more, his eyes fixed on Sophia. Your choice. She hesitated, then reached out and took at the paper cool against her fingertips. Sophia held the envelope, its edges pressing faintly into her palm, as if it carried more weight than its size allowed. Gordon didn't look away. His gaze had that steady, unnerving quality of someone who was certain they'd just shifted the balance of the conversation. Lucas exhaled sharply. Don't, he said under his breath, though she couldn't tell if it was meant for her or for Gordon. What is this? She asked again, her voice quieter this time. Gordon's lips curved, not into warmth, but into something calculated. You'll want to see this before trusting anyone here. The words were smooth, deliberate, as if each had been placed with precision on a chessboard. The hum of the community hall behind her seemed to fade. For a moment, all she heard was the muffled thump of her pulse and the faint rustle of the envelope as her fingers tightened around it. She had no idea why her stomach had knotted, but some part of her already knew it wasn't going to hold good news. Lucas stepped in his posture, protective. You've had your moment, Hale. Now you can leave. But Gordon remained rooted, his calm composure, almost provoking in its restraint. You think shutting me out changes what's inside that envelope? Truth doesn't need my voice to stand. Sophia's eyes flicked between them, trying to gauge which man's motives she should fear more. The air between the three of them carried the same tension as a thunderstorm about to break. From inside, the faint clink of cutlery against ceramic drifted out, followed by a burst of laughter. Life went on just beyond those double doors, oblivious to the taut moment unraveling outside. Gordon glanced briefly toward the hall, then back to her. Read it when you're alone, he said softly, his voice almost coaxing now. And remember, nothing is as simple as they want you to believe. Before she could respond, the door to the hall swung open, and Ethan stepped out, framed by the warm golden light spilling from inside. His gaze went immediately to Gordon, his jaw tightening in recognition. Everything all right out here? Ethan's tone was polite, but there was an undertow in it, a warning that made Gordon finally take a measured step back. We were just finishing up, Gordon replied smoothly, slipping his hands into his coat pockets. Ethan's eyes lingered on him a moment longer before turning to Sophia. Clara's looking for you. She says the coffee's ready. She glanced down at the envelope still in her hand. Its flap was unsealed, as if inviting her to slide a finger under and pull the truth into the light. She lifted it just enough for the first page to slide forward. White paper, black type. The stark lines of what looked like medical documents peeking out. Her breath caught. Sophia, Ethan's voice was closer now, his hand resting lightly at her elbow. Come back inside. It's getting cold. The warmth from the hall wrapped around her as she stepped back toward the open door, the envelope pressed tightly to her chest. She hadn't read a word, but already it felt like it had the power to change everything. She hesitated on the threshold, the laughter and clinking plates spilling over her like a reminder of the fragile normalcy she'd just stepped away from. Ethan's gaze searched her face. Come on, he said gently. She took one last glance over her shoulder. Gordon stood at the far edge of the walkway, now hands still in his pockets, a faint knowing smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. Lucas remained near the doorway, his eyes locked on Gordon with a wariness that was impossible to miss. Sophia turned and stepped fully inside, letting the door close behind her. A week after Thanksgiving, rain falls again. Sophia sits in the guest house, the unopened envelope from Gordon still on the table. The lamplight casts a soft amber glow over the small living room shadows stretching across the patterned rug. Beyond the window, raindrops thread down the glass, blurring the world into streaks of gray and gold from the street lamp outside. The sound is steady like 1,000 soft taps on tin and earth, a rhythm that makes her chest ache. It's too familiar, too much like that first night she met Ethan. She leans back into the couch, hands cupped around a lukewarm mug of tea Clara brought by earlier. The steam is long gone, but she's barely taken a sip. Her eyes drift to the envelope again. It sits exactly where she left it a week ago. Its cream paper unmarred, except for the crease at the corner from where she'd almost opened it. She's not sure what stopped her fear exhaustion, or the quiet hope that if she doesn't look, she can hold on to the fragile balance she's found here. The rain drums harder wind pushing against the window. She hears the faint hum of Ethan's Range Rover pulling up the drive, the crunch of gravel under his tires. She stays where she is, watching the way the lamplight catches each falling drop. When the knock comes, it's gentle but firm. She knows his rhythm by now. "Come in," she says, her voice softer than she intends. Ethan steps inside, bringing with him a faint draft of cold air and the scent of rain-soaked wool. He's carrying a folder under one arm, his dark hair damp at the edges. "I thought you might want some company tonight," he says, glancing toward the table. His gaze lingers on the envelope. "Still haven't opened it?" Sophia shakes her head. "Feels like once I do, there's no going back." He sets the folder down on the counter, then crosses the room to sit across from her. The rain fills the silence between them for a moment before he says, "Sometimes knowing is better than wondering." Before she can answer, another set of headlights sweeps across the driveway. A darker car, sleek, unfamiliar, rolls to a stop behind Ethan's. The sound of a door shutting follows, and a moment later, a figure steps into view through the rain-streaked glass. Lucas. Sophia sets her mug down, her heartbeat picking up. Ethan's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly as he rises to his feet. "Stay here," he murmurs before opening the door. Lucas is already halfway up the steps, his coat collar turned up against the weather. There's no trace of his usual smirk tonight, just something worn in the lines around his eyes. "I need to talk to her," he says to Ethan, his voice low but urgent. Ethan blocks the doorway. "Not tonight." Lucas exhales, rain dripping from his hair. "It's about the envelope. I think she deserves to hear it from me before she reads it." Sophia, unable to bear listening from the couch, stands and moves to the doorway. "It's fine," she says quietly. "Let him in." Ethan steps back reluctantly, letting Lucas cross the threshold. The air between the two men is taut, but neither raises their voice. Lucas's gaze flicks to the envelope, then back to her. "You should open it," he says, but there's a tremor in his voice now. She picks it up, sliding her finger under the flap with slow deliberation. The paper tears softly, almost too gently for the storm swirling outside. She pulls out the first page, a letterhead from a private clinic in Richmond. Her eyes scan the bolded line near the top, but the words blur for a moment before they sink in. Test results indicating permanent infertility. Her breath catches. She looks up at Lucas, who's watching her with something between shame and relief. "It's true," he says quietly. "I found out, not long before we split. I didn't know how to tell you." The rain seems to grow louder, drowning out everything else. She grips the paper tightly, trying to steady her breathing. Then, she glances down at her belly, her voice faltering. "This baby." Lucas swallows hard. "I know, and I don't care. I still want to be part of her life." Ethan shifts beside her, his expression unreadable, but his presence grounding. "Sophia, you don't have to make any decisions right now," he says, his voice steady. But her pulse is erratic, the room suddenly feeling too warm. The paper slips from her hand, fluttering onto the coffee table. A wave of dizziness washes over her, and then the first sharp contraction hits. Sophia gasps, her hands instinctively flying to her stomach. The contraction tightens like a band pulling from the inside out, sharp enough to make her knees weaken. She grips the edge of the couch for balance, her breath coming fast. Ethan is at her side instantly. "Breathe, Sophia. In through your nose, out through your mouth." His voice is calm but firm, the kind of steady tone meant to keep panic from taking root. Lucas moves closer, his eyes wide. Is it time? She shakes her head, uncertain. I I don't know. It's too soon, isn't it? Her due date was still weeks away, but her body doesn't seem to care. Another wave hits shorter, but no less intense, forcing her to double over. Ethan glances at the clock, then to Lucas. We're not waiting to find out. Grab her bag from the bedroom. Lucas doesn't hesitate, disappearing down the short hall, while Ethan guides Sophia toward the door. Rain is still spilling from the low, heavy clouds, the driveway glistening under the yellow wash of the porch light. The cold air shocks her lungs, making each breath sharper. Lucas returns with the small overnight bag Claire insisted she keep ready just in case. He hands it to Ethan, who slings it over his shoulder before helping Sophia down the steps. The Range Rover is already unlocked, its interior lights spilling warm light into the wet night. Lucas reaches for the passenger door, but Ethan's voice cuts through. Back seat, more space for her to stretch out. Neither man argues further. Lucas slides into the back with Sophia, while Ethan takes the driver's seat and starts the engine. The heater roars to life, sending warm air into the chilled cabin. They pull out onto Main Street, the wipers working furiously against the rain. Storefronts flash past in watery blurs, Benson's Bakery dark for the night, the diner's neon sign humming faintly in the distance. Sophia focuses on the rhythm of the wipers, trying to keep her mind steady. But every few minutes another contraction rolls through, pulling a low groan from her lips. Lucas leans forward, bracing a hand on the seat in front of him. You're doing great. Just keep breathing. Like he said, his voice cracks slightly, the polished confidence from earlier stripped away. Ethan keeps his eyes on the slick road, jaw tight. Hospital's 15 minutes out. I'll call ahead. He taps the Bluetooth button, his voice shifting to brisk efficiency. Willow Creek Hospital. This is Ethan Ward. I'm bringing in a pregnant woman in active labor. Yes, Sophia Morales. Early contractions, water not yet broken. We'll be there in 10. The nurse's voice on the other end is calm, professional. We'll be ready for her, Mr. Ward. Sophia leans back against the seat, clutching the strap of her bag, as if it could anchor her. Between contractions, her thoughts drift in fragments. Clara's warm smile over a pie. The sound of leaves crunching underfoot at the Thanksgiving table. The unopened pie she'd promised herself after the holiday. All those small moments feel far away now, replaced by the urgency of getting to the hospital. As they near the outskirts of town, a truck barrels past in the opposite lane, spraying a wave of cold water onto the windshield. Ethan mutters something under his breath, flicking the wipers to their highest speed. Another contraction grips her longer this time, and she lets out a sharp cry. Lucas's hand hovers near hers, hesitant, before she takes it without thinking. He squeezes, murmuring, I'm right here. When the bright white cross of the hospital sign appears ahead, relief floods the car. Ethan swings into the drop-off lane, braking smoothly before jumping out. The automatic doors slide open to reveal a nurse and an orderly with a wheelchair already waiting. Lucas helps Sophia into the chair, while Ethan shoulders her bag. Inside the hospital, smells faintly of antiseptic and brewed coffee, the linoleum floors gleaming under fluorescent lights. The nurse pushes Sophia down the hall, speaking in quick, clipped tones to another staff member. Room 3, called Dr. Patel. Ethan walks alongside, his long strides matching the wheelchair's pace. Lucas stays just behind, his gaze fixed on Sophia's face. In the short moments between contractions, she notices how different he looks, less like the man who had thrown her out, and more like someone stripped down to raw concern. They wheel her into a small, bright delivery room, the bed already prepared. A monitor beeps steadily in the corner. The nurse helps her up, adjusting the bed controls so she can lean back comfortably. I'll check how far along you are, the nurse says, pulling on gloves. Ethan positions himself near the head of the bed, speaking low. You're safe here. We're both staying with you. Sophia's throat tightens at the quiet certainty in his voice. She looks to Lucas, who gives a small nod. No leaving. Not tonight. Another contraction builds, and she grips both of their hands at once. The room feels smaller now. Every sound amplified, the steady beep of the monitor, the rustle of the nurse's scrubs, the muted hum of rain outside against the window pane. Sophia's grip tightens around Ethan's hand as the next contraction surges sharp and insistent. "You're at 7 centimeters, the nurse says, her tone brisk but reassuring. "It's moving quickly. Dr. Patel is on her way." Sophia's breath comes faster, shallow. Ethan leans closer, his voice steady, almost like a metronome. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're doing so well." Lucas is on her other side now, his palm warm against hers. His expression is unreadable, a mix of guilt, awe, and something else she can't quite name. For a fleeting second, she remembers the man he used to be, the one who once whispered to her about building a home together. The nurse adjusts the IV drip, checking the fetal monitor. Heartbeat steady. Baby's doing great. Another contraction rips through this one longer, pulling a groan from deep in Sophia's chest. Lucas's voice, softer than she's heard in years, slips out. "Almost there. Just hang on." Ethan glances at the monitor, then at the nurse. "How much longer? Could be an hour, could be 20 minutes. Her body's doing the work." The nurse answers, moving to set up a tray of sterile instruments. The door swings open and Dr. Patel enters, adjusting her glasses. "All right, Sophia, let's meet your baby." The next stretch of time blurs sharp commands from Dr. Patel, the rhythmic encouragement from both men. The almost surreal sensation of the world narrowing to nothing but breath and push. Sophia feels sweat bead on her forehead, her back aching, her muscles trembling. She's dimly aware of Clara slipping into the room for a moment, setting a thermos on the side table, her eyes glistening before the nurse gently ushers her back out. "All right, Sophia, one more good push," Dr. Patel urges. Her entire body strains the pressure, reaching a breaking point, and then in an instant, it's replaced by the thin, strong cry of new life. "It's a girl," Dr. Patel announces, her voice warm as the newborn is placed against Sophia's chest. The tears come without warning, hot, relentless. She looks down at her daughter, tiny fingers curling reflexively, skin soft and warm. Ethan's hand rests gently on her shoulder, his voice barely a whisper. "She's perfect." Lucas, for a moment, forgets everything else. His eyes are fixed on the baby, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words come. He settles for brushing the back of one finger along the baby's arm, careful, almost reverent. The nurse moves to clean and swaddle the newborn, returning her to Sophia's arms. The three of them stand there, Sophia in the bed, Ethan and Lucas on either side, bound together by something none of them expected to share. Outside the delivery room, the hallway smells faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Clara sits in a chair, knitting quietly, the steady click of her needles, a soft counterpoint to the muted footsteps of staff passing by. Hours later, after the baby has been fed and checked, Ethan steps into the hall to make a quick call. Lucas remains at Sophia's bedside, speaking quietly to her about names, about promises he knows she may never fully trust again. The hospital lobby is dim at this late hour. Rain streaks the glass doors, the parking lot lights casting pale halos on the wet pavement. A figure stands just beyond the glow-tall coat collar, turned-up phone pressed to his ear. Gordon Hale watches through the glass, a faint smile curving his lips as his voice carries into the quiet. They're all together now, perfect. The press will eat this alive. Fresh snow dusts the rooftops as the whole town gathers for the Christmas tree lighting ceremony. The square glows under strands of golden lights draped from lamppost to lamppost, their reflection shimmering on the thin layer of frost that coats the brick paths. The air smells of cinnamon pine and the faint sweetness of roasting chestnuts. Sophia stands near the edge of the crowd, her daughter nestled in a thick cream blanket. The baby's tiny face peeking out from under a knitted cap Clara made herself. Ethan is beside her, one hand lightly resting at her back, as though to shield her from the chill, the other gripping a steaming paper cup of cocoa. His presence is steady grounding. Across the square, the choir's voices rise in harmony. Silent night carried into the still winter air. Clara bustles past them, a tray of sugar cookies in mittened hands, stopping every few steps to pass one out to children and receive grateful smiles in return. She catches Sophia's eye and winks, her earlier words echoing in Sophia's mind. "Family is who shows up for you." Lucas approaches from the opposite side, his dark coat dusted with snowflakes. He's more subdued than she's ever seen him, his hands tucked into his pockets, eyes searching for hers. For a moment, Sophia tenses, but then he simply nods in greeting. No demands, no arguments, just quiet acknowledgement. The mayor steps up to the small stage in front of the towering spruce that dominates the square. Thank you, Willow Creek, for joining us tonight as we celebrate not just the season, but the strength of our community. Applause ripples through the crowd, the sound muffled by gloves and the soft fall of snow. Behind them, the Hillcrest Manor garden glows in the distance, frost-covered roses catching the light like tiny crystals. Sophia can see the outline of the guest house through the trees, its windows warm and familiar. Now, no longer just a shelter from the rain, but a place she calls home. Lucas moves closer, his voice low, so only she and Ethan can hear. I've handed everything over. The emails, the bank transfers. Gordon can't talk his way out this time. Ethan studies him for a long moment before offering a curt nod. Good. It's time she had her name cleared. Sophia's chest tightens with relief, though the weight of the past weeks hasn't fully lifted. Still, the sight of the town gathered like this, the same people who once whispered in diners and paused before serving her coffee, feels different now. There are nods, even smiles. Clara returns, pressing a cookie into Ethan's hand. You'll need something sweet before the big moment, she teases before leaning down to coo at the baby. And you, little one, are stealing the show tonight. As the mayor continues speaking about gratitude and unity, Sophia looks down at her daughter and realizes how much has shifted since that first stormy night. She came here with nothing but a suitcase, and now somehow she's standing in the heart of Willow Creek, with people who have chosen to stand by her. The mayor lifts his hand toward the giant switch at the base of the spruce. And now let's light up our Christmas tree. A cheer rises, voices mixing with the church bells ringing from across the square. The switch is thrown, and in an instant the tree bursts into light strings of white and gold, weaving upward to the star at the very top. Gasps echo around them as children squeal and couples draw closer together. Snow begins to fall in earnest now, soft flakes landing in Sophia's hair. Ethan's arm wraps more firmly around her shoulders. On her other side, Lucas stands quietly, his eyes on the tree, but his attention divided, watching Sophia and the baby almost as much as the lights. The square is alive with warmth despite the cold, a moment that feels suspended in time. For the first time in weeks, Sophia lets herself simply be, no past mistakes chasing her, no immediate fear of what's next. Just this light snow and the people who showed up when she needed them most. The lights on the spruce sparkle like 1,000 tiny stars, their glow casting soft halos across the crowd. Sophia's baby stirs in her arms, a little whimper escaping, before she settles again against her mother's chest. The sound tugs at Ethan's attention. He shifts slightly, his expression softening in that quiet way that says more than any words could. The mayor steps aside, inviting townsfolk to mingle, sip cider, and enjoy the music. A quartet of older men in matching plaid scarves begins a rendition of O Holy Night, their voices deep and steady. The melody carries over the square, winding between clusters of neighbors, exchanging hugs and stories. Lucas lingers near Sophia and Ethan, his hands still in his pockets, but his posture less guarded than before. I mean it, he says quietly, his breath visible in the cold. I'm not here to disrupt what you've built. I want to be part of her life in a way that won't hurt anyone. His eyes flicker to the baby, then to Ethan, waiting for some signal of acceptance. Ethan doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he glances toward the garden, where the frost-covered roses glisten in the moonlight. That's up to Sophia, he finally says, his tone measured but not unkind. Sophia feels the weight of both their gazes. There was a time not so long ago when she would have braced herself for an argument here in front of the whole town. But tonight something is different. If you mean what you say, she replies, her voice steady, then we can figure it out. Together. Lucas nods once as if accepting terms in a quiet truce. Clara approaches just then, cheeks pink from the cold, her knit scarf wrapped twice around her neck. I've been looking for you, she says, slipping between them like a seasoned diplomat. The ladies at the cider stand want to meet the little one. You'd think she was the guest of honor. She might as well be, Ethan murmurs with a half smile. As they cross toward the cider stand, people stop to greet them. Mr. O'Reilly from the hardware store pats Ethan's shoulder. Mrs. Jenkins from the library asks to see the baby's tiny hands. Even the diner waitress, who had once hesitated to serve Sophia, now leans in with a warm grin, cooing at the bundle in her arms. It's subtle, but the shift is undeniable: acceptance replacing suspicion, warmth replacing whispers. Sophia realizes that while the documents Gordon brought threatened to shatter her, the real truth of her standing here tonight is simpler. She has been seen for who she is, not what people assumed. The choir finishes their carol, and the mayor calls everyone to gather near the stage again. Before we close this evening, he says, I want to thank some special folks who remind us what community really means. His eyes scan the crowd until they find Ethan. Ethan Ward, for your generosity, year after year, this town is brighter because of you. Applause swells and Ethan shifts uncomfortably, but smiles, giving a small wave. Then the mayor's gaze falls on Sophia. And Sophia Morales, welcome to Willow Creek. May this be the first of many Christmases you spend here. The crowd cheers again, the sound warmer now, free of the undercurrent of gossip that had once followed her name. Clara squeezes Sophia's shoulder, whispering, Told you honey family is who shows up. From the edge of the square, the church bells begin to chime the hour. Snowflakes drift lazily through the light, catching on hair and eyelashes. Sophia glances at Ethan, then at Lucas, and realizes this is the closest thing to peace she's felt in a long time. A volunteer hands out candles for the final song. Ethan takes one, shielding the tiny flame with his hand before passing it to Sophia. Lucas accepts his own, the flicker reflecting in his eyes. The three of them stand shoulder to shoulder as the first notes of Joy to the World rise into the night. By the second verse, the entire square is lit with candlelight, the glow mingling with the Christmas tree's brilliance. Sophia's heart swells at the sight. The place that once felt like a backdrop to her troubles now feels like home. She looks down at her daughter, whose tiny fist curls around the edge of her blanket. You're going to grow up knowing what this means, she whispers. Not just lights and songs, but people who care. Ethan hears her and leans closer. She already does. Because of you. The words settle over her like the snow, soft, weightless, but impossible to ignore. She's no longer just surviving. She's part of something. And tonight, as the lights shimmer and the music swells, that something feels unbreakable. The choir's final notes fade into the night, replaced by the hum of the crowd as people linger, unwilling to let the moment end. The Christmas tree stands proudly at the center of the square, its lights casting a warm golden glow over the snow-covered rooftops and smiling faces. Ethan, Sophia, and Lucas remain near the front, the baby nestled safely in Sophia's arms. The three of them are framed by the towering tree, the candles in their hands now extinguished, but the light in their expressions unmistakable. It happens almost without thought. Ethan steps closer to Sophia, his arm resting protectively at her back. Lucas shifts in beside them, his posture uncharacteristically relaxed. Clara, standing just off to the side, catches the image and smiles to herself. An unconventional family maybe, but one bound by something deeper than appearances. The mayor calls for the official lighting of the tree's star. On the count of 3, he says, holding the crowd in cheerful suspense. 1, 2, 3. The star atop the tree bursts into brilliance, a cascade of tiny white bulbs shimmering against the night sky. Gasps ripple through the square, followed by applause that rolls like thunder. The light bathes everyone in its glow. Sophia, Ethan, Lucas, and the baby illuminated as if they belong here together in this moment. Sophia's throat tightens. She feels the warmth of Ethan's steady presence beside her and the surprising steadiness in Lucas's gaze. It's not about who has more claim or who stands where, it's about standing together. The baby shifts in her arms, blinking up at the shimmering lights, and Sophia swears she sees the faintest curve of a smile. Looks like she approves. Ethan murmurs, his voice low enough that only Sophia hears. I think she does. Sophia replies, her own smile trembling with emotion. Lucas glances between them, then clears his throat. I'll say it again, I'm not perfect, but I'll be here. For her. For both of you if you'll let me. Ethan studies him for a long moment, then offers a single nod. We'll figure it out. It's not a grand declaration, but in Willow Creek such small agreements carry weight. Around them, children chase each other through the snow, their laughter ringing out like sleigh bells. Couples sway gently to the carols still drifting from the speakers. The scent of hot cocoa and spiced cider mingles with the crisp winter air. It's the kind of scene that will be remembered not for its perfection, but for its heart. Clara joins them again, handing Sophia a paper cup. It's not my tea, but it'll keep you warm, she says with a wink. You all look good up there together, like you belong. Sophia takes the cup, feeling the steam curl against her cheeks. Thank you, Clara, for everything. Don't thank me, Clara says, her voice softening. You walked through that storm yourself. You just let us walk beside you. The words settle in Sophia's chest, mingling with the glow of the lights and the steady rhythm of her daughter's breathing. She's no longer just passing through Willow Creek. She's part of it now, woven into its stories, its traditions, its future. As the crowd begins to disperse, Ethan turns to her, ready to head back. She glances at the tree one more time, the lights reflecting in her eyes. Yeah, I'm ready. They walk together toward Hillcrest Manor, Lucas trailing a few steps behind, but no longer separate. The snow crunches softly beneath their feet, and for once the silence feels comfortable. Back at the manor, the garden is dusted with frost, the roses bowing slightly under the weight of snowflakes. Inside, the windows glow warmly, promising rest after a night of celebration. Later, after the baby is tucked in and the last of the candles has burned down, Ethan steps into his study to find a thick envelope on his desk. No return address, just his name written in a precise, unfamiliar hand. He frowns, tearing it open. Inside is a single sheet of heavy paper stamped with an official seal. His eyes skim the heading, the formal language leaping out at him in sharp relief. It's a legal notice. He reads it again, slower this time, the implications tightening in his chest. This isn't about taxes or some minor land dispute. This is something bigger, something that could unravel everything he's built here in Willow Creek. In the hallway, Sophia's soft humming drifts from the nursery. Ethan glances toward the sound, his jaw tightening. Whatever this is, he can't let it touch her or the baby. But the words on the page are impossible to ignore, a legal notice that could change the future of Ethan's estate. Beneath the gentle glow of Willow Creek's Christmas lights, it was clear that storms, whether of weather or of the heart, had given way to something softer. In the quiet, after the town seemed to breathe together, holding close the truth that kindness often finds its way home. No matter the whispers or the faces people wear, compassion has a way of revealing the soul beneath. Like a porch light left burning through the longest night, a single act of grace can guide someone back where they belong. And maybe in our own small ways we can keep that light burning for those still walking through the rain.